My name is Adeline Ashford, and I'm 34 years old. For the past 3 years, I had quietly covered nearly every major expense my family. I paid the mortgage on the house where my parents and my younger sister, Renata, lived. I financed our annual family cruise, covered the cost of a twin summer camp that my mother insisted was an important family tradition, and stepped in whenever money was tight. I never expected praise or recognition. All I wanted was for my sons, Theo and Silas, to grow up feeling connected to a loving family after losing their father when they were only 3 years old. That morning began like any other. The coffee was brewing, the twins were arguing over which cereal to eat, and the early sunlight streamed through the kitchen blinds as I reviewed the cruise itinerary one last time. I checked the cabin assignments and matched the excursion tickets to everyone's names. Then my phone vibrated. It was a message from my mother. Something about receiving it so early made my stomach tighten. I placed my coffee mug on the counter before opening it. The text was short and cold. Plans changed. You and the twins aren't coming. Your sister only wants real family on the cruise. I read the message 3 times before the meaning truly hit me. Real family. My mother had used those words before in subtle ways, usually comparing Renata's marriage to my life as a widow. But this time the words were aimed directly at me and my boys. I called her immediately. She answered on the 4th ring, and I could hear dishes clinking in the background as if she were calmly making breakfast. I asked what she meant. Instead of explaining, she sighed as though I was creating unnecessary drama. She told me Renata felt uncomfortable having the boys on what was supposed to become a romantic vacation once her fiancé's family joined them halfway through the trip. She insisted it wasn't personal. According to her, it was simply a matter of limited seating in cabin arrangements. I asked a simple question. Whose idea was this cruise in the first place? There was a long pause before she quietly admitted it had originally been my idea. Then, she added that Renata had paid for the suite upgrades, so it was now her vacation to organize however she wanted. I sat there in complete silence, staring at the granite countertop I had personally chosen and paid for when my parents remodeled the house after their retirement savings fell short. It was the same house where Theo and Silas had spent countless weekends, learned to ride their bikes, and always called their second home. Finally, I asked one last question. Are the boys and I still part of this family? My mother didn't answer. The silence on the other end of the line told me everything I needed to know. I ended the call before my voice broke. Across the table, Theo and Silas were quietly watching me, sensing something was wrong in the way children always seem to do. I packed their lunches, sent them off to school with a reassuring smile, and promised everything would be okay. Once the house was empty, I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and began reviewing every account connected to my family. The cruise deposit, the monthly mortgage payments for my parents' house, the tuition I had secretly been paying for Renata's culinary program for more than a year. One by one, I canceled every automatic payment. Then I called the bank about the house. Legally, the mortgage was still in my name because I had been the only one who qualified for the loan after my parents were denied due to poor credit. They had lived there rent-free for 6 years, believing my generosity would never have limits. After that, I contacted a trusted real estate agent, calmly explained the situation, and by the end of the afternoon, the process of putting the house on the market had already begun. A for sale sign was ordered that afternoon for a house I had never lived in, even though every document carried my signature. In a single day, I canceled every payment I had been making, put the house on the market, and quietly prepared to leave with my boys. There were no dramatic arguments, no angry messages, and no public announcements. I packed 2 suitcases, picked Theo and Silas up early from school, told them we were going on a special adventure together, and drove 3 hours to a small coastal cottage I had rented under a different name. The twins thought it was an unexpected beach vacation. They loved the fresh ocean air, the cozy rooms, and the window overlooking the water instead of the familiar neighborhood street. I let them enjoy the excitement without burdening them with the truth. What they didn't know, and what no one back home knew, was that the paperwork was already underway, the property listing was live, and the chapter of my life built on endless sacrifice had quietly come to an end. That evening, after the boys had fallen asleep in a place that finally felt like ours alone, I switched my phone to silent and placed it face down on the bedside table. Deep down, I knew the peace wouldn't last. When my parents and Renata returned from their cruise expecting life to continue exactly as before, they were met with something completely different. They arrived on a Thursday afternoon, sunburned, smiling, and carrying shopping bags full of souvenirs and matching sunglasses. According to our longtime neighbor, Margaret, My mother walked straight to the front door without a second thought. But when she inserted her key, the lock refused to turn. The locks had been replaced 3 days earlier by the locksmith I hired on the same morning. I made the hardest decision of my life. At first my mother looked confused, then irritated, and finally frightened when she noticed the real estate sign standing in the flower bed she had lovingly cared for every spring. It read, "Sale pending, closing in 14 days." Margaret later told me my mother's face lost all its color before she even reached for her phone. Mine, however, remained switched off for most of the day while Theo and Silas laughed on the beach, proudly riding the small waves without their floaties for the very first time. When I finally turned my phone back on that evening, the screen exploded with notifications. 43 missed calls, countless voicemail messages, texts ranging from confusion to anger, and finally desperation. "Is this some kind of mistake? Please call us. What have you done? We need that house." Sitting on the porch with the cool ocean breeze brushing through my hair, I slowly read every message. Instead of guilt or satisfaction, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: clarity. After the boys were asleep, I finally returned my mother's call. She answered immediately, her voice trembling as she demanded to know how I could do something like this to my own family. Calmly, I asked her which family she was talking about, the same family that removed my sons from a vacation I had paid for without even speaking to me first. She hesitated before insisting it had really been Renata's decision. I reminded her that she had been the one who sent the message, and she had remained silent when I asked whether my boys still counted as real family. That silence had given me my answer. Before she could respond, Renata grabbed the phone. She accused me of overreacting and claimed I had destroyed their home over a simple misunderstanding. I told her there had been no misunderstanding at all. It had been a deliberate choice, and every choice carries consequences. Without raising my voice, I explained that the mortgage had always been in my name because none of them qualified for the loan. Every monthly payment for 6 years had come directly from my account. The house had never been an unconditional gift. It had simply been a privilege I chose to provide, and one I was no longer willing to continue. Renata called me heartless. I quietly replied that true cruelty was excluding 2 innocent 8-year-old boys from a family vacation simply because they didn't fit the image she wanted alongside her fiancé's relative. Once again, the line fell silent. A few moments later my mother came back on the phone, this time no longer angry but pleading. She asked where they were supposed to go and what would happen now that the sale was already moving forward. I told her the truth. I had already purchased a smaller house near the coast, one that was perfect for me, Theo, and Silas. It wasn't large or luxurious, but it was a place where no one would ever again question whether my children belonged. I didn't remind her of every sacrifice I had made over the years. I didn't bring up old disappointments. I simply allowed her to experience the consequences of her own decision. Over the next several days, the constant phone calls gradually slowed. The angry messages disappeared, replaced only by a formal email from the attorney representing Renata's fiancé's family, asking about the timeline for the property sale. Even they understood that nothing would ever return to the way it had been. 2 weeks later, the house officially sold. I used part of the money to pay for our new home in full and placed the remaining funds into savings accounts for Theo and Silas, making sure their future would be built on security instead of sacrifice. Sometimes I still think about the woman I used to be, the one who would have apologized simply to keep everyone happy, the one who would have paid for another vacation, another family tradition, another painful reminder that my children were expected to accept less than everyone else. Then I look outside and see Theo and Silas running barefoot across the porch, laughing freely without carrying the weight of the choices adults made around. In those moments, I know I didn't abandon my family. I protected the only family that truly depended on me. Piece by piece, I built a new life from the ruins of expectations that had never been fair in the place. And for the first time in many years, the family that mattered most, my little family of 3, finally felt complete. If this story touched your heart and reminded you that real family is defined by love, loyalty, and respect rather than blood alone, be sure to subscribe for more unforgettable stories. There are many more waiting to be told, and you won't want to miss what comes next.